Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Transforming Trauma to Triumph. I'm your host, Diana Min, and I am here with our very special guest, Ms. Kristen Smedley, who is the author of Thriving Blind and the creator of Brilliantly Resilient. Hi, Kristen.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's great to chat with you.
Yeah, I'm super excited for you to be sharing your story with us. I know it's pretty incredible. So, for our audience that isn't familiar with you or your work, just let us know a little bit about who you are, what you do, and who you help.
Yeah, so I am now the mom of three kids that are college, high school senior, looking at colleges. We were just doing all the application stuff today, and my youngest has just started driving. She's 16.
Wow.
And I had planned my whole life, like literally my whole life since I was 5 years old, to be a teacher. I have one of those personalities, I guess, that I just knew from early on. I am a planner kind of person and I just knew I was going to be a teacher. I live in the Philly area. I grew up here. I went to the college that you go to out here to be a teacher. Everybody knew that's what I was going to do. I knew that I would get married. I knew I would live in a nice home. I just made all the plans and it all came true. But the thing that I could not wait for was to be a mom. And that was my biggest dream of my whole life. And way back in the year 2000, when, the big crisis that was looming was, were all the computers going to die, right? Back when
I remember
Y2K hit,
that.
everybody was scrambling and freaking out, and I was celebrating because my firstborn son was born right after the new year. And when I tell you, Diana, I was like, I mean, I'm an optimistic, happy person by nature. And I was like this goofball that smiled all day, every day, that this little person was there. I mean, for 9 months, as my belly was growing and he's growing inside of me, you start out with like, oh, I just can't wait to meet this little person. Then by the time he was born, I'm like, okay, I wonder if he's going to be on the Eagles, as the quarterback, or is he going to be on the pitcher's mound with the Phillies? And I would dress him in all that stuff, and I'm envisioning like the valedictorian, and he was going to do all the things that I didn't get to do, And I was so stinking happy. It was insane. And then when Michael was 4.5 months old, a doctor said to me, your son is blind. And when I tell you that all of those hopes and dreams that had been growing and growing and growing were extinguished in that one little sentence, your son is blind. And all that doctor could say to me was, good luck. Because I asked him, I said, is he going to play baseball? He said, no. I said, is he going to drive? He said, no. And I'm like, I don't know anybody that's blind. Like, what is he going to do? And the doctor said, I have no idea, but good luck. And, to be a planner like I am, and a box checker, and, a list maker, and I had memorized the What to Expect When You're Expecting book. I mean, I knew every chapter way ahead of the month that was coming. I wasn't handed What to Expect When Your Child is Blind. I wasn't handed even a pamphlet at that moment. And as you can probably imagine, I went home and cried for too long. Too long. It was a very, very hard part of my journey. Yeah. And then 3 years later, 3.5 years later, I was very pregnant with my second child. And I had been kind of praying blindness away every single day. And I was getting more and more frustrated and sad because at night I would pray. And in the morning I'd walk into Michael's room and he was still blind. No cures were happening. Nothing was happening. But I will say this. There was a moment when I was starting to really panic because I was probably about 8 months pregnant. And I was doing that whole, gee, I wonder what this baby is going to be like and what he's going to do with his life. And all of a sudden I thought, oh gosh, what if this one is affected too? Because I stood a 25% chance of that pregnancy of having another blind child. And as I was having the biggest breakdown of my life, my son Michael, who was 3.5, came bouncing into my room where I was having my breakdown. And Michael at 3.5 never walked. He bounced and skipped and jumped and sang and danced. He was the happiest kid you could ever see. And the life changing thing that he said to me that morning was, "Mommy, isn't this the best day ever?" And I thought, gosh, you have no idea how this is not the best day, Michael. Like, you have no idea what you're missing in your life. You have no idea of this road ahead that's a nightmare. And I thought all that, but I said to him, Michael, why is this the best day ever? And he said, Mommy, the sun is up and I have all my toys and I'm so happy. And he went back to his perfect day. And I thought to myself, if it was Hollywood, they would have had lightning bolts come down and the music, an orchestra start to play. Because I thought, oh my God, I waited my whole life to be a mom. I had the most incredible role model in a mom. And I knew that this was my biggest purpose of all the other purposes in my life. And I'm crushing it on everything. And I was the worst version of Michael's mom that could ever have walked the earth, because I was sitting and praying this challenge away instead of embracing what it would be that he would need to live his life unaffected by this challenge. And this little tiny person was living unaffected by his challenge. I just never saw it. I kept seeing what he was missing. And instead, here's my little person. He wasn't missing anything. He was experiencing more than I could ever have dreamed. And I often say now that, for 3 years, I prayed for a cure for blindness from Michael. And what I got was a cure of my own blindness. That moment when he said, isn't this the best day ever, opened my eyes literally to, oh my gosh, the reason I was so upset was because he wasn't going to be able to live out my dreams. I had no business putting my dreams on him, This was his life and his purpose. And I mean, I give myself grace now. And if there's parents that are listening, they're probably like, oh my God, I'm doing the same thing. That's where we end up butting heads with our kids, right? We do the same thing. Like, no, you're supposed to go to the Ivy League school because I couldn't. And I've lived this life and took this job to afford the Ivy League school, and you don't want to go there? Like, that's what we do to our kids. And I know it's all in love. I was all rooted in love with my kids. But at that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, this is my chance. Take my dreams off of him. I didn't know what to expect for his life. I had never even met a blind person before until I met Michael. I said, well, my role is to get him what he needs and then follow his lead. And I got to tell you, the places this kid has taken me, following his lead and following his own purpose, is absolutely extraordinary.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's such a beautiful story. So where is Michael? We want to know, where is Michael now?
So here's the crazy part. So Michael now, well, right after that moment, about maybe a few weeks later, Mitchell came into the world way early. It's totally Mitchell. He came in early, lightning fast, upside down, and like throwing a party as soon as he came in. It was like 80 million people were trying to figure out how to handle this, and that's Mitchell. He's so different from Michael, which is hilarious. But both of them have lived their dreams, their everything that they've wanted to do, they have figured out. Michael's now at Penn State. He's a junior. He just hit, he's in the top 1% of the 75,000 undergrads there, 2 majors, 2 minors, a pre-law certificate program. He started his college career in Nashville at Belmont University and formed a band, recorded an album. Wait, Diana, I get a call from him. He goes, Mom, we're having the album release party. I fly down to Nashville. This big album release party that he organized, got the venue, all the people there. It was absolutely extraordinary. And he turns to me and I was like, Michael, this is like unbelievable. And he goes, I know, right? I'm kind of bored. I think I'm going to move to Penn State. Like, who says that? There wasn't enough. Here's a kid that nobody really thought that college was even possible for him 20 years ago. Goes to this school, does everything you could possibly do in Nashville, and says, I'm a little bored. There's not enough for me here.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that funny?
What a what an
crazy.
I'm just kidding. How, oh man, I mean, the journey of him just being so fearless and so courageous to just, I'm going to do things. I'm not handicapped. I'm not at a disadvantage. I'm sure you being his mom and loving him and supporting him has, you know, play a huge role in that perspective that he has in life. Tell me a little bit about like how, I mean, I know you said you let him take the lead, but I'm sure obviously as a mother, you're guiding him as well.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, and look, I say this now smiling, but and he's going to be 21 soon, and I just learned, maybe last year, if even that, to really, really back up and stop worrying. When we were at Belmont's campus in Nashville, I mean, there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of work that goes in on the front end, and I honor this with parents that are in situations like that. When you have a child that is different from the norm, even like I have a sighted daughter, and there's a lot of work in certain aspects of her life that you got to just put in all of that time and effort at certain stages. When you have two kids that are blind, it is a heck of a lot of work on the front end for all of their K to 12 years to make sure that they are fully, I always say, leveling the playing field. My role was to get them the tools, the resources, the teachers, the technology, everything, just to level the playing field and see where they were going to go with it. But even with Michael, I mean, my guys have been on championship baseball teams, on sighted teams where Michael led his team in RBIs. Like, they weren't just the token, special needs kids on a team. Michael's played every sport you could possibly play. Taught me to surf when we were on vacation in Hawaii. I mean, they've done everything. So
Wow.
and then Michael was the valedictorian of his class of 600 kids, right?
Wow.
So we get to Nashville, and I moved in to a hotel for a week because we had to I mean, there's a lot of work. You got to memorize the campus. You got to figure out your classes and everything, And then once we do that for a week, he was good to go for the solid school year. But now I'm in Philly. His school is 1,000 miles from my house, and I'm going to now get on a plane. Oh my gosh, my heart still is like, I had to go get on a plane the next day to come home and leave him there to, do his thing. And now this kid had done everything. He had traveled to England. He went on his own he qualified for an international leadership conference in Chicago where he traveled by himself and met 400 people. Like, he's done everything, but yet I'm about to get on a plane and I'm having a bit of a breakdown in the middle of campus. And I'm like, Michael, I don't think, and the tears are starting, and I'm like, I'm on the verge of a panic attack. I don't know that this was the right decision. Like, this is really far away, Michael does not get angry often. And I think that was probably the first time he was really angry with me. And he was so mad. And his thing was, I've been doing this for 18 years. Like, why don't you trust me? And I thought, oh my God. I'm like, but Michael, you've been in this bubble of I'm 2 steps ahead and making sure that like the teachers know everything. And yes, he ran all of his meetings and he did a lot of coordinating and he found the colleges and did the interviews on his own. But I'm like, this is like real now. This is 24 hours a day that I can't just show up and get somebody in line for you. And people here don't know you like our town. They don't know to get out of the way or whatever. And he was like, I can't believe that you don't trust me after all these years. And I thought, oh my God, you're right. You're right. You've been preparing for 18 years for this moment. And he's looking at me so disgusted. And I go, hold on a minute. He's my firstborn, right? I have a ton of girlfriends that were all dropping their kids, their firstborn, off at college. So I open my phone and I go into Facebook and I go, look, Lisa's crying and they're all crying because they're leaving their kids at college. I'm allowed to cry and freak out. No, it was fun. It was funny. And then he ended up like, he just, in this time right now, you were mentioning that I'm the co-founder of Brilliantly Resilient, this online show and program. Everyone in the world is talking about resilience now because of everything that's going on. And Michael pointed it out to me one day. He's like, Mom, it was like cracking him up that everybody's talking about bouncing back and figuring things out. He's like, that's my everyday, my whole life. Nothing ever goes according to plan when you're in a sighted world and you don't have sight. So he's always planning ahead. You know, he makes it look like, so does Mitchell. They make it look like it's just, there's not a lot of thought that goes into it, but he's always thinking of things ahead. Figuring out what might be the stumbling blocks, what might be some things that he has to plan for. And then on the fly, he's constantly figuring things out. He's constantly bouncing back. So I'm like, oh my gosh, we should be looking at the blind community resilience skills.
Right, being able to adapt, being able to adjust, and to keep rolling with it.
Yeah.
Right, that's
Yeah. That's what they do on a daily basis.
wait. So did you mention that you also your daughter as well? Your youngest daughter is blind as well.
No, she's sighted. She's sighted.
Oh,
So the two boys were they have the same blindness. It's the LCA is what it's called. And then my daughter could be a carrier. She has a 50% chance of being a carrier, but she is sighted. And it's very interesting, her being the youngest. She was born into a family of full inclusion, accessibility, everything. So she's 16 now, and she's a super cool kid to hang out with. And most people are drawn to her, and it's not anything that she does on purpose. I mean, she by nature is a cool kid, but she's got this experience where she sees where we would see barrier or shame or struggle, a white cane, a wheelchair, cochlear hearing aid. We see barriers or struggle there. And my Carissa sees a tool. The cane is a tool for people to get around independently. A wheelchair is a tool. She doesn't have that bias that the rest of us have. So it's been people will say, oh my gosh, that must be a struggle for her to have two blind brothers. I'm like, are you kidding me? She's a lucky one that came into this world with a perception that I work 24 hours a day to change perceptions around the globe. And my daughter has it built in. It's a pretty cool perk.
yeah. Wow. What a beautiful awareness to have, and like that shift in perspective to see this is not a barrier. This isn't a disadvantage. This is a gift. It's a blessing. Tell me
Yeah.
a little bit about how that has also now transformed the work you do in the world. Obviously, you have your show that you're doing, and what else? How else are you contributing your experience into that community?
Yeah, what I realized is, I don't necessarily call blindness or pandemics or losing your business. I don't call any of that blessings, but what I do know is the blessing in it is I've learned to not just bounce back from what I call a life sucker punch. I've learned, especially with blindness. I mean, with having two blind kids, I did have to walk away from my dream. I planned my whole life to be a teacher, and then I had to walk away from all that. And I struggled with that for a little while because it was a lot to teach them Braille and how to access a world they couldn't see and all that. But when I started tapping into those natural skills, we call it brilliance in my program. When I started tapping into that and then realized every time I go up against a struggle, like I would go up against a school district that didn't think that my boys belonged in their classrooms of this top school in the country. They didn't think they belonged. They didn't think they could teach them. I was thinking, are you kidding me? That's what teaching is. Like, it's expanding your mind, and it's using all of the tools and talents, but every time I would go up against resistance for them initially, with people not accepting or having a good perception of blindness, I would have to dig deep into my own brilliance. I learned how to advocate for them, which I had to become a good storyteller. I had to be a really good public speaker. I did a TED talk to start changing these perceptions as I was finding out about the horrific unemployment rate and all that. And now, I mean, it's very interesting now that my mom said to me one day, she goes, I said, gee, I wonder what my life would have been like if I would have stayed in the classroom and taught. And she was like, are you kidding? You're teaching every single day all around the world. I mean, I've been on stages all around the world. I'm in Zoom rooms all around the world. And I now have, in a couple of weeks, it's called the Succeed Without Sight Summit, that we've got families, professionals. The tickets keep selling out. I have to keep trying to upgrade my Zoom to get more seats in it. But it's people from literally all over the globe coming in to change their perceptions of blindness. All these people that I've met, You know, and we joke. I was almost late to come to this conversation because I was in another one with all these folks that are going to be speaking at the summit that do all kinds of incredible things in this world without sight. And I said, can you guys imagine? Because they're like, Kristen, you know, like all the cool blind people, you know, these people that are coming to the summit are so much fun. And I'm like, can you imagine 20 years ago? I didn't know one blind person till Michael was
Yeah.
born, you know? And now, you know, it's a testament to I was just saying this earlier today that when you think, this is what I've learned in this whole journey, and this is a hard one, and I still struggle with this one, but when you think that everything is falling apart, if you step back for a split second and look at it as it's supposed to, that's the stuff that's supposed to fall away because something else is falling into place. And when you look at it like that, then things like I went through a horrific divorce. I'm still in the midst of this massive sucker punch of 4 years. But when I look at all the stuff, I wanted a 50th wedding anniversary. I wanted, you know, the same house for the kids to come back to with my grandkids and all. But when I let go of that and let that fall apart the way it was supposed to, the stuff that's falling into place now is absolutely extraordinary. But that took me about 2 years to appreciate that concept. Let me tell you, it was not a pretty ride. However, I should put it on my fridge and take my own advice sometimes, right?
Yeah. I think, and this goes into a lot of different philosophies that I, follow and study about expectation, right? So we have these expectations about how our life is supposed to go. You had
Mm-hmm.
expectations about how your son's life was going to go, how your marriage was going to go. And when we hold on to these expectations and then life comes in, it's like, oh, you thought actually, but it's not happening that way. And then
Yep.
we start to lose things, right? We start to, things begin to shift, right? Other things happen. You have two children that are blind. So all of those expectations, then, when we attach to them and we emotionally attach to them and then we receive something else, that gap, that difference is where all the suffering happens, right?
Yep.
And so like you said, what you've learned is to release what is falling apart, what's meant to be taken from us, right? Releasing those expectations of what our life is supposed to look like. I had no idea that, and I can relate on that sense because no idea that I would be here doing the work that I'm doing. At all. If you were to ask me like 5 or 6 years ago, I'm like, no, absolutely not. Like that's not. But when we release expectation, we allow life to shape shift and form around us, like you said, better than we expected, right? Better than what
Yep.
we could have imagined or asked for. And I like to try to say, it's always going to be better on the other side, and if it's not better, you're not on the other side yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have a choice in that. Do you want to come through, like I say, do you want to come through broken or brilliant? Because you're going to come through. I mean, like this right now, what everybody's experiencing with the pandemic, we're going to get on the other side of it. But do you want to be that bitter, broken person, or do you want to be the brilliant, you turned it around and you looked and saw that there was an opportunity to do something else? And I can say that and smile and flip my hair and whatever now, and I know that that's a brutal process for some of the journey. It was brutal for me. And there were there are days. I have one of my girlfriends from like my whole life since like third grade. There are days where I'll call her and say, my life sucks. How's yours? And she'll go, oh, mine sucks way more than yours. And we go at it like that, like, oh no, wait to hear what happened to me. Like you got to have one of those friends that you can call and say, please tell me how much
Yeah.
worse your day is than mine. But, a lot of times I can win that contest too with stuff that goes on, but it really is, it is, it's so cliche to say life is a choice, but it really is. And I will also say that there are those days when things are just too much. I mean, when I think back to my two boys, and my daughter is only 13 months behind my second son, behind my Mitch. I mean, that was a lot when they were little, and it was just me all the time, and trying to stay 2 steps ahead of my boys and then making sure that my daughter isn't left behind, all that kind of stuff. It gets exhausting. And I'm like, I wish I would have more back then taken the day and said, this is not a day where I'm going to accomplish anything more than feeding everybody and keeping them alive. Like back to your point of expectations. I think I know for me personally, I'm one of those like high achievers and a little bit of type A in there, and I want to check the box at the end of the day. And there are days, and now I'll say, well, yep, I got that giant to-do list, and I'll be better tomorrow. If I quit now, watch some Hallmark movies with my daughter, and then tomorrow morning come back at it. And I've accomplished so much more on this journey doing it that way than nope, I'm going to keep going, until I check every box today. That doesn't work out for me. And then the other thing that I actually do keynotes on expectations, and I say, everyone had said to me for so many years, gosh, your journey has been extraordinary. And then when I looked up the word extraordinary, I'm like, it's out of the ordinary. It's out of what I could have ever have planned, could have expected. So I'll say to people now, it's SEE, set extraordinary expectations. Like for my boys, my job, my goal was to make their journey, the expectations that everybody had of their journey, extraordinary, outside of what you would typically expect. So when I would go into a school meeting, they would say, well, they said to me in kindergarten, 70% is the highest Michael's going to achieve. That's what we're going to work towards. That's his 100%. And I'm like, why is that his 100%? Like, he's smart. He can do everything. He just can't see it. We're going to teach him a little bit differently. And they would say, well, that's what we ordinarily would do for a blind child. And I'm like, well, no. We're extraordinary in this family. We are outside of what's ordinary. So, and so when people would see me come and they're like, here we go. We got to be like outside the box with this one. She's going to make us rethink this whole thing. And I actually go about that, everything. When I was going through my divorce struggle and just could not, I'm like, oh my God, I'm in my late 40s and suddenly single. Are you kidding me? And I thought, well, how can we go? I had a lot of girlfriends that were going through it, and I did not want that ordinary, everybody goes on the dating apps and everybody handles it like this and everybody fights with the ex. And I'm like, no. We're going to go a little bit different. We're going to go outside the ordinary. We're going to put in some things in place. And whoa, boy, did that, my hair started to grow back, I wasn't like losing sleep all the time, but it really does come down, it's our expectations. And then before that, it's our perceptions of what lies ahead, how we should be. When I was looking at blindness, my perception of it was dark, sad, lonely, shameful, horrible. And what was my life? Dark, lonely, shameful, horrible, because my perception of it was that way. And then when I looked at Michael and thought, gosh, he's not bothered. This isn't something that's dark and depressing. My kid is the biggest light I've ever seen in the world. And as soon as I flipped that perception, my expectations changed and my outcomes have been, there's days where I say to my boys, okay, ease up on the thriving, ease up. Like I can't keep up.
Oh my God, you are a super mom, superhuman. You are definitely extraordinary in all senses. I mean, I can't. I have some friends that are moms, and moms in general are just like, just extraordinary. Yeah. Just I don't have a child right now.
It's the greatest role on the planet, but it is they say, oh, it's the hardest job. It is when it's done right. And it is when it's with full intention and unconditional love. And I was very blessed to be raised in unconditional love with parents that couldn't, I always say that my parents are magicians. They're like the Bible story, the loaves and the fishes. I still have no idea how they would make stuff happen out of nothing. But they also taught me to be creative and to have fun in the simplest things. I just said on our show this morning that I'm like, my kids and I can have fun in a cardboard box, like literally can make fun out of nothing. But I learned that growing up, that whole thing about the kids don't really need all the things that we think that we have to provide for them. It's knowing that they can come home and no matter what, you're there, you're on their side, you're part of their team, you're cheering them on. You might be screaming over how many water bottles are in a bedroom sometimes, but at the end of the day, it's so much work. Like for all of any of your listeners that are young moms, with the young kids, those early years, it is exhausting. It's because you're putting so much love and work into it. But then, the tail end of that now with 21, 17, and 16, I can't tell you how many times in a day I'm like, I can't believe that I get to have a front row seat to the three of them, the stuff that they do. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. It's so worth all of that, all the work, energy, hope, prayers, all of that on the front end is so worth it on the tail end here with the stuff that they're doing.
Oh, I know I can feel like how deeply soul satisfying that is for you to see your children just go out into the world and be as great as they are. Kristen, tell the audience more about where they can find you, where they can get in touch with your work, where they can just hear more of your amazing stories and inspiration.
Yeah, so everything I do is at kristensmedley.com. And I would encourage everybody to join the Brilliantly Resilient community on Facebook. It's a free group that we have a show every single day about stories of resilience. And we have hilarious fun because, look, I'm 49. If I'm not going to have a great time, I'm not in, it's like all about fun. And I actually at brilliantlyresilient.net, you can get a lot of there's freebies there for if you're in the middle of a struggle. Go grab some of that stuff. And we have some master classes and programs, but definitely join that Brilliantly Resilient community and check me out on kristensmedley.com. And I'm all over social media as Kristen Smedley.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kristen. Your story, literally this entire time I've been listening, has been giving me chills. And I'm just like, oh, I can feel your heart, even in this virtual space that we're in. I'm so grateful to have been connected with you and just to know that like there's just some amazing, powerful, not only woman, mother, just light in the world, especially right now, giving people, what they need, which is some motivation and unconditional love as always. So
I appreciate it. And thanks for the work that you do to get these stories out there, because without folks like you, then the stories aren't out and spreading the great message around the world. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you guys for tuning into another episode of Transforming Trauma to Triumph. I'm your host, Diana Mint, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.
See ya.